Hi, in this video we will learn how to create sparklines. So think of sparklines as a small graph that you can fit in a single cell. So you see we have sales data for USA, China, Brazil, Mexico, and Canada. And if I want to represent this in a small chart, if you will, that I can fit in a single cell, we call that sparklines. And sparklines have different types. So you can do column sparklines, line sparklines, or win-loss sparklines. So to add your sparklines, first you will select where you want to place your sparklines. So I want the sparklines to be here. And then you would go to Insert, and then you have Sparklines Group. And so one of the options we have is column, so column sparklines. Let's go ahead and go with that. Click on it. And so the Create Sparklines dialog box opens. And so the location where I want to place the sparklines is here. It's already highlighted. And the data range, I will select all my data here. And that will be represented in these cells. So that's my data range. That's the location range for the sparklines. We click OK. And now we have sparklines. You see, for example, that this is 2456. You see how the column is small. And this is 9174. And you see how the column is big. Now, one thing to note here is the way sparklines work is that they represent each grouping. So this sparkline in F3 represent this particular range, and this represent this range. And what I mean by that is basically they don't follow the same scale. So each one has its own scale depending on the values that are in that particular row. And so this can be misleading if you look at this and you want to compare the sparklines against each other in the different cells. So you see, for example, this one is 9174. You see the size of the column here versus this one, which is 6578, which is much smaller than the 9174, but the column look the same size as this one. So we want to make sure that they all follow the same axis for the maximum value. And so if you select these sparklines, you can go to Sparkline tab at the top, and then we can go to Axis and say, you know what, I want the vertical axis maximum value to be the same for all sparklines. And you will see how this will shrink accordingly. See how they shrank, including this one. So the biggest value we have here is the 9174, and so that's the biggest column, and everything shrinks accordingly. And now I can compare them against each other. It's more meaningful. If you select the sparklines, and we go back to sparklines options, you know, things we can do, for example, is I want to know my high point quickly, so I can check high point. Typically, you want your high point to be green, not red, because it's a good thing, that's sales data. And so we can go to marker color and say, you know what, I want my high point to be in green. And let's say I want my low point to be in red, so I can go to marker color again and say low point red. And that is how you can create your sparklines. If you want to change them to another type of sparkline, like line sparkline, you can click on it and that will change it to a line sparkline. So it's a quick visual to show you how your data changes over time in a small graph.